Before we begin, make sure you subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications, because today we are looking at a South African coin that may be sitting unnoticed in an old collection, drawer, box, or jar. And if you have ever wondered whether an ordinary-looking coin from decades ago could become interesting to collectors, stay with me until the very end, because the final value of this 1989 1 Rand coin may surprise you. The 1989 1 Rand from South Africa is more than just an old piece of pocket change. It comes from an important period in South African history, and coins from this era can attract attention for their design, condition, variety, and collector appeal. When you first hold this coin, it may not look particularly rare. That is exactly why it can be easy to overlook. Many people see the denomination and the date, then put the coin away without taking a closer look. But experienced collectors know that the real story can be hidden in small details. The 1989 issue belongs to a series of South African 1 Rand coins carrying the distinctive designs of the period. The coin has the South African identity clearly represented through its inscriptions and national imagery, making it an interesting piece for anyone collecting South African currency from the late 20th century. One of the most important things to understand is that age alone does not automatically make a coin valuable. A coin from 1989 is now several decades old, but its condition, exact variety, and demand among collectors can matter much more than the date itself. That means you should never clean this coin simply because it looks dark, dull, or dirty. Natural toning and the original surface can be important to collectors. Cleaning can leave scratches or an unnatural appearance, and may actually reduce the coin's desirability. Now look carefully around the lettering, the date, the rim, and the main design elements. Collectors often examine coins under good lighting or magnification because small differences can sometimes separate an ordinary example from a more interesting one. The minting details are also worth paying attention to. South African coins from this period can exist in different collecting categories, including regular circulation pieces and specially produced proof examples. Proof coins were made with special preparation and are generally much more desirable when preserved in excellent condition. For the 1989 1 Rand, published collector references show that ordinary examples can have relatively modest market values, while proof examples can command more depending on condition and demand. One reference lists indicative values for the regular 1989 issue around the lower dollar range, while a separate 1989 proof issue is listed higher. These figures should be treated as guides rather than guaranteed selling prices because actual transactions can vary. And this is where your coin becomes especially interesting. If your 1989 1 Rand has unusually sharp details, strong original surfaces, minimal marks, and an attractive appearance, it may deserve closer attention than a heavily circulated example. Collectors generally place a premium on coins that have survived with their original details intact. So before you decide that your coin is simply worth 1 Rand, take a few minutes to inspect it properly. Check both sides. Look at the rim. Examine the lettering. Compare the date with photographs of known examples. And most importantly, look for anything unusual that could indicate a variety, error, or special finish. There is another reason this coin is worth discussing. The South African Mint's official mintage information shows that 1989 was an active year for coin production, with substantial numbers produced across the country's coinage program. That means rarity cannot simply be assumed because the coin is old. The strongest collector interest usually comes from the combination of scarcity, condition, and demand. That is an important lesson for every collector. Don't judge a coin only by its age, and don't judge it only by its face value. Sometimes the smallest details tell the biggest story. And if you inherited this coin from a parent or grandparent, there is something else to remember. Its value may not be purely financial. A coin that traveled through someone's life during the late 1980s can carry a connection to a particular time, place, and family history. For many collectors, that personal history is part of what makes old coins worth preserving. But now comes the question everyone has been waiting for: what could this 1989 South African 1 Rand actually be worth? Keep watching, because in the final part we will reveal the value figure featured in today's video and explain what could make a coin like this worth more than an ordinary example. Now let's get to the part that every collector wants to know, the value. The 1989 1 Rand should not automatically be considered a four-figure coin simply because it is old. Its real market value depends heavily on condition, rarity, variety, finish, and what a buyer is actually willing to pay. That distinction is extremely important when evaluating older South African coins. For an ordinary circulated example, the value can remain fairly modest. A coin with noticeable scratches, worn details, heavy marks, or signs of long circulation may be interesting historically without being exceptionally valuable. But a beautifully preserved example can attract much more attention. This is why grading matters. Imagine finding two 1989 1 Rand coins that look almost identical at first glance. One has been carried in pockets for years, while the other was carefully stored and has sharp details and clean original surfaces. Even though they share the same date and denomination, collectors may value them very differently. The same principle applies to proof coins. If your coin has a specially prepared proof appearance, extremely sharp details, and mirror-like fields rather than the normal appearance of a circulation strike, do not treat it like an ordinary pocket change example. Proof coins are collected differently and can have a separate market. You should also be careful with claims about rare errors. The internet is full of dramatic stories about ordinary coins supposedly being worth thousands, or even millions. Sometimes genuine errors are valuable, but a scratch, stain, discoloration, or damage caused after the coin left the mint is not necessarily a minting error. A genuine error generally needs to be examined carefully and compared with known minting characteristics. If you believe your 1989 1 Rand has something unusual, professional identification can be worthwhile before you make any decision about selling it. And remember, never polish or chemically clean the coin to make it look newer. Collectors usually prefer original surfaces, and cleaning can permanently affect the coin's appearance and collectible appeal. Now let's return to the figure featured in today's video. For this presentation, the headline value we are highlighting for the 1989 1 Rand is $1,457. But there is an important point you should never forget. $1,457 should not be interpreted as a guaranteed price for every 1989 1 Rand. A coin's actual selling price can be dramatically different depending on its grade, authenticity, variety, proof status, eye appeal, certification, and current collector demand. So if you have one of these coins, don't immediately assume that you have either a fortune or an ordinary coin. Inspect it first. Use a soft, non-abrasive surface. Handle it by the edges. Look at both sides under good lighting. Check the date, lettering, rim, and design details. Compare its appearance with reliable collector references. If the coin appears exceptionally well preserved or has a genuine unusual feature, consider having it examined by a reputable numismatic professional. The most exciting discoveries are often made when someone takes a second look at something they almost ignored. Maybe this coin has been sitting inside an old family collection for years. Maybe it came from a box of inherited coins. Maybe you found it among foreign currency that nobody had examined in decades. Whatever its story, the 1989 1 Rand deserves a closer look before you decide what it is worth. And that is the real lesson behind collecting old coins. You are not simply collecting metal. You are preserving history. Every mark, design, date, and inscription can tell you something about the time when that coin was produced and the people who used it. So before you spend, trade, clean, or sell your 1989 1 Rand, stop and inspect it carefully. The difference between an ordinary example and a highly desirable collector piece can sometimes come down to details that are almost invisible without careful examination. If you enjoyed this discovery, subscribe to the channel and stay with us for more fascinating old coins, hidden varieties, historical pieces, and surprising collector stories. You never know what valuable piece of history might be hiding in your own collection. And remember, don't judge an old coin by its face value. Sometimes the story behind the coin is worth looking at twice. Family keepsake could turn out to be something truly interesting. Today, we are taking a close look at a coin that has a name capable of creating plenty of excitement among collectors. The South African 1 Rand dated 1969. And there is something important we need to clear up right away. Many people describe this coin as a gold Rand because of its age, appearance, or because South Africa produced genuine gold Rand coins. But the standard 1969 1 Rand featuring drive T.E. Donges is actually listed as a silver coin, with a composition of 80% silver, a weight of about 15 grams, and a diameter of roughly 32.7 millimeters. That distinction matters enormously when you are trying to determine what your coin might really be worth. The 1969 date also makes this coin especially interesting because it belongs to an important period in South African numismatic history. The coin commemorates Dr. Theophilus Ebenezer Donges, and examples were produced with both English and Afrikaans legends. The Afrikaans version carries Suid-Afrika 1969, while the reverse presents the national arms and the denomination. Now imagine finding one of these coins after it has spent decades sitting quietly in an old collection. At first glance, you might simply see an old silver rand. But collectors know that the real story can be hidden in the details. The first thing to examine is the condition. A coin that has heavy scratches, worn lettering, damaged edges, or evidence of cleaning can be dramatically different from an example that has remained sharp and attractive. Collectors pay close attention to the preservation of the portrait, lettering, date, national arms, and small design details. The second thing to check is the exact version. The 1969 issue is known in different legend varieties, and the English and Afrikaans versions should not simply be treated as identical coins. The standard 1969 issue had a reported mintage of about 506,000 pieces, while some cataloged proof examples are much scarcer. And this is where coin collecting becomes fascinating. Two coins can carry exactly the same year and denomination, yet their desirability can be very different because of condition, variety, originality, and collector demand. So before you place a large price tag on your 1969 1 Rand, slow down and inspect it carefully. Look at the surface under good lighting. Check whether the details are naturally preserved or have been polished. Examine the edge. Compare the lettering. And most importantly, determine whether you actually have the silver 1969 commemorative Rand or a completely different South African Rand issue. There is also another reason not to judge this coin simply by its age. Being more than half a century old does not automatically make a coin extremely valuable. Rarity, condition, authenticity, and market demand are what can transform an old coin into a highly desirable collectible. And now we come to the part that many collectors have been waiting for. Could a 1969 1 Rand really be worth $1,467? Keep watching, because in the second part we are going to look at the value question much more carefully, including what can make a particular example stand out from an ordinary piece, what collectors should look for before selling, and why an eye-catching number like $1,467 should never be accepted without checking the actual coin. Now we reach the most important question. What could this 1969 South African 1 Rand actually be worth? The first thing every collector should understand is that a normal 1969 1 Rand is not automatically a $1,467 coin. Current reference information identifies the standard issue as an 80% silver coin weighing 15 grams, and published values for ordinary examples are generally far below that headline figure. Numista, for example, gives indicative values in the tens of dollars depending on condition, while NGC lists a silver melt value of roughly the low $20 range based on its reference silver price. But that does not mean you should ignore the coin. In fact, the reason this particular date deserves attention is because condition and variety can make a dramatic difference. The 1969 issue was produced in significant numbers, and references list about 506,000 pieces for the main variety. There are also cataloged proof examples, including a reported 12,000-piece proof issue for the Afrikaans version. So what should you look for? Start with the portrait. The obverse shows Dr. T. E. Donji's facing right. Look closely at the highest points of the portrait. If the hair, facial details, and surrounding lettering remain crisp, the coin may have retained considerable original detail. Next, turn the coin over and examine the reverse. You should see the South African national arms together with the denomination and the motto, Ex unitate vires. The edge is reeded, so inspect those grooves carefully for unusual damage or signs that the coin may have been altered. Another fascinating detail is the language variety. Some 1969 examples use the English wording, South Africa 1969, while another variety uses, South Africa 1969. This is one of the easiest features for a collector to check, and it can help identify exactly which version is in your hands. And now let's talk about the number $1,467. A figure like $1,467 should be treated as a potential exceptional value scenario, not as the automatic value of every 1969 1 rand. One published specialist price guide currently shows a much higher figure for a top proof category, illustrating why exceptional examples can behave very differently from ordinary circulated coins. That means if someone tells you, every 1969 1 rand is worth $1,467. Be careful. A responsible collector should ask, is it a proof? What grade is it? Which variety is it? Is it authentic? Has it been professionally graded? And most importantly, is that price supported by an actual market transaction rather than simply an online asking price? Those questions can protect you from both overestimating and underestimating your collection. There is another mistake you should avoid, cleaning the coin. If you discover an old silver rand, do not immediately polish it until it shines. Scrubbing, chemical cleaning, or abrasive materials can permanently damage the original surface and reduce collector appeal. An old coin with natural toning and honest wear can be much more desirable than a coin that has been aggressively cleaned. And remember, this coin has historical importance beyond its monetary value. It represents a specific moment in South African history and commemorates the end of Dr. Donji's presidency. That historical connection gives collectors another reason to preserve these pieces rather than treating them simply as old silver. So if you have a 1969 1 rand sitting in an old box, don't throw it into a pile of ordinary change. Pick it up, identify the language, inspect both sides, check the edge, and look closely at the condition. And now for the final answer. The headline value of $1,467 should not be considered the normal value of a standard 1969 South African 1 rand. Ordinary examples can be worth considerably less, while exceptional proof or highly desirable certified examples may command substantially more. The exact value depends on authenticity, variety, condition, grade, and the market at the time of sale. So the 1969 1 rand may not be a guaranteed $1,467 treasure, but it is absolutely a coin worth investigating. If you have one, don't judge it by its age alone. Look at the details. Sometimes the smallest difference on an old coin can be the difference between an ordinary collectible and a truly special piece. And before you sell, always get a proper identification and professional opinion if you believe your example could be an unusually rare or high-grade piece, turn out to be something collectors really want to investigate. Today, we are taking a closer look at a South African 50-cent coin dated 2003. At first glance, this may look like nothing more than a small piece of change from the early 2000s. But coins can become interesting for reasons that have very little to do with their original face value. The 2003 50-cent issue is especially worth examining because there is more than one version associated with that year. The standard circulating type is a bronze-plated steel coin weighing about 5 grams and measuring around 22 millimeters across. One documented 2003 version features a cricket player on the reverse, while another standard type features the distinctive Strelitzia plant. That difference matters. When someone says, "I have a South African 50 cents from 2003, the first question should not be, "How much is it worth?" The better question is, "Exactly which 2003 50 cents do I have?" That is where careful examination becomes important. Look closely at the date. Make sure it clearly reads 2003. Then examine the reverse design. If you see the cricket-themed design, you may have the commemorative circulating issue. Published catalog information records a mintage of 11,749 pieces for that particular 2003 cricket version, making it a much more specialized issue than an ordinary mass-produced coin. And here is something many people overlook. Condition can dramatically change the collecting interest of a coin. A heavily circulated coin may have scratches, dull surfaces, worn lettering, and flattened details. That does not make it worthless, but it usually places it in a very different category from a coin that has been carefully preserved since the day it was issued. For the 2003 cricket 50 cents, published collector market estimates vary by condition, with ordinary circulated examples generally worth only modest amounts, while very high-grade examples can reach several dollars according to cataloged estimates. That may sound surprising when you compare it with the coin's original denomination. But remember, collectors are not simply buying 50 cents of spending power. They are buying history, scarcity, condition, design, and the excitement of finding a particular version. There is another fascinating possibility connected with 2003. South Africa also produced a special silver 50 cents rhinoceros issue that year. This is not the same as the normal circulating 50 cents coin. It was a large .925 silver commemorative piece weighing roughly 76 grams, with a diameter of about 50 millimeters. Catalog information records limited production for its proof version. So if you have a 2003 50 cents coin, do not immediately assume that every example from that year has the same value. The metal, design, production type, condition, and rarity all matter. This is exactly why older coin collecting can be so rewarding. Two coins can carry the same denomination and the same year, yet have completely different collector appeal. And there is one more thing you should never ignore: errors and unusual characteristics. If your coin has an obvious mistake in the date, lettering, design placement, striking, edge, or surface that appears to have happened during minting, it deserves closer investigation. But be careful. Damage caused after the coin left the mint is not automatically a valuable mint error. Collectors want genuine, identifiable varieties and errors, not simply coins that have been scratched, bent, polished, or damaged through years of use. So before cleaning your 2003 50 cents, stop. Do not polish it to make it shine. Do not scrape away dark areas. Do not use household chemicals. A collector would much rather see an original surface than a damaged coin that has been aggressively cleaned. Instead, hold the coin under good lighting and inspect both sides carefully. Look at the date, lettering, design details, rim, edge, and overall condition. If possible, compare it with a known example of the same type. And now we come to the question everyone has been waiting for. Could this 2003 South African 50 cents really be worth hundreds or even thousands of dollars? The honest answer is that you should be extremely careful with dramatic value claims. Published catalog estimates for ordinary 2003 examples are nowhere near $1,472. The documented values for common versions are generally in the range of cents to a few dollars depending on condition, while specialized silver issues can have substantially higher values because of their precious metal content and limited production. But for this video, the number to remember is $1,472. That is the headline value we are highlighting for this coin story, but it should not be treated as a guaranteed market price for every 2003 50 cents. A real selling price depends on authentication, exact variety, condition, rarity, precious metal content where applicable, and what collectors are willing to pay at the time. So before you dismiss that old South African 50 cents sitting in a drawer, take another look. Check the year. Check the design. Check the condition. And most importantly, check whether you have the ordinary circulating version or one of the special 2003 issues. Sometimes the smallest coins are the ones that make collectors stop and look twice. If you enjoyed this discovery, make sure you are subscribed, because there are always more old coins waiting to be examined, identified, and understood. And remember, the real excitement in coin collecting is not simply finding a coin with a huge price tag. It is discovering the story behind a piece of history that may have been sitting unnoticed for years. 50 cents 2003 South Africa coin value. Now let's go one step deeper into the story of the 2003 South African 50 cents coin, because this is where things become especially interesting for collectors who enjoy looking beyond the date and denomination. One of the most recognizable 2003 versions is the cricket commemorative 50 cents. This coin was connected with South Africa hosting the 2003 ICC Cricket World Cup, and its reverse shows a cricket player diving toward the wicket. The coin is made from bronze-plated steel, weighs about 5 grams, and measures approximately 22 millimeters across. That cricket design gives this little coin something that ordinary pocket change does not have: a direct connection to a major sporting event in South African history. And there is an important detail that can make this coin much more interesting. Published catalog information lists only 11,749 pieces for the 2003 cricket version. That is a surprisingly small number when you think about how many ordinary coins can be produced for circulation. For someone who has never collected coins before, the number 11,749 might not sound extraordinary. But collectors understand why production figures matter. When fewer examples are available, finding a particular coin in excellent condition can become much more exciting. Imagine finding one of these coins after 20 years in an old box, family collection, drawer, or forgotten jar. The coin may have passed through many hands, but perhaps yours escaped heavy circulation. That is why condition deserves your attention. Look at the highest points of the design. Are the details sharp, or have they become smooth from years of handling? Is the lettering clear? Is the rim strong and complete? Does the coin still have much of its original surface? A coin that has been heavily circulated may show scratches, marks, discoloration, or worn details. A carefully preserved example can look dramatically different. And if your coin has an unusual appearance, do not immediately assume that it is a valuable error. This is one of the biggest mistakes new collectors make. A scratch is usually just a scratch. A dent is usually damage. A strange color can sometimes come from environmental exposure. Even a coin that looks dramatically different may have changed after leaving the mint. A genuine mint error is something else entirely. So if you discover something unusual, take clear photographs, compare it with a normal example, and get an experienced opinion before putting a huge price on it. There is another reason the year 2003 deserves attention. South Africa produced several different 50 cents issues connected with that year. Catalog records list the standard circulating 2003 50 cents as well as the cricket commemorative version. There was also a separate silver rhinoceros 50 cents from the wildlife series. And that silver rhinoceros coin is completely different from the small circulating coin. The wildlife issue is made from 0.925 silver and weighs about 76.25 grams, with a diameter of approximately 50 millimeters. Its reverse features a rhinoceros, while the denomination remains 50 cents. This is an excellent reminder that the words 50 cents 2003 alone are not enough to determine value. You need to identify the exact coin. If your coin is small, around 22 millimeters, and bronze-plated steel, you are likely looking at a circulating issue. If it is dramatically larger and made of silver, you may have something from the wildlife series. And that difference could completely change the collecting conversation. Now let's talk about the number many viewers are waiting for. For this video, we are highlighting a possible headline value of $1,472. But please understand what that number means. It should not be presented as a guaranteed selling price for every 2003 50 cents coin. Published collector information for the 2003 Cricket version shows much more modest indicative values, with examples ranging from under $1 in lower grades to several dollars for high-grade pieces. Those figures are based on collector evaluations and online sales data and are only indications, not guaranteed prices. So why would someone ever talk about a four-figure value? Because exceptional coins can sometimes be treated very differently from ordinary examples. A rare variety, confirmed mint error, unusual specimen, exceptional grade, or specialized issue can attract attention that a normal circulated coin does not. But the key word is confirmed. Never assume that an online listing asking $1,472 means someone actually paid $1,472. Collectors distinguish between asking prices and completed sales. If you believe your 2003 cents is unusual, keep it exactly as you found it. Do not clean it. Do not polish it. Do not scratch around the lettering. Original surfaces are important, and careless cleaning can permanently reduce collector appeal. Instead, examine the coin slowly. Check the year. Check the reverse design. Check the edge. Check the metal and size. Check for unusual details. Then compare your coin with reliable examples of the same issue. And if everything matches the special cricket version, you may have a fascinating piece of South African numismatic history, especially because the documented mintage is only 11,749 pieces. So the next time you see a 2003 cents sitting quietly in an old collection, do not throw it into a pile with ordinary change. Turn it over. Look closely. That small cricket design may be telling you that you are holding a commemorative coin with a story far more interesting than its original 50-cent denomination suggests. And that is the real magic of collecting old coins. Sometimes the value is not obvious until you know exactly what you are looking at. Easily overlook. It is the 5-cent coin dated 1986, and if you have one sitting in an old collection, a drawer, a jar, or even a forgotten box of coins, you may want to take a much closer look before deciding that it is only worth 5 cents. At first glance, this coin may not seem particularly exciting. It is small, familiar, and from a time when coins like this were used in everyday transactions. But that is exactly what makes older coins so interesting. Millions of coins may have passed through shops, pockets, tills, and households, yet today collectors are interested in the surviving examples that have something special about them. The 1986 5 cents belongs to an important period in South African coinage. By the mid-1980s, these coins were part of ordinary daily life, which means many examples experienced years of circulation. They were handled, dropped, scratched, rubbed against other coins, and exposed to dirt and moisture. Because of that, finding an example with unusually sharp details and excellent surfaces can be much more interesting to a collector than finding a heavily worn example. And this is where the real story begins. When examining an old coin, do not immediately focus on the date alone. Look at the entire coin. Check the lettering, the edges, the central design, and the small details that can disappear surprisingly quickly through circulation. A coin that has remained bright and well preserved can stand apart from one that has spent decades in someone's pocket. Condition is one of the biggest factors collectors consider. A circulated 1986 5 cents may have limited value beyond its historical and collecting interest, while a beautifully preserved example can attract considerably more attention. Collectors may also pay closer attention to coins showing unusual characteristics, possible striking differences, or genuine minting errors. There is another important point that many people overlook: cleaning. If you discover an old 1986 5 cents, resist the temptation to polish it until it shines. A cleaned coin can lose collector appeal because polishing may remove the original surface and leave unnatural marks. What looks like a brighter coin to the eye can actually be less desirable to a serious collector. Instead, handle the coin carefully by its edges and examine it under good lighting. Look for scratches, discoloration, dents, worn lettering, and areas where the original detail remains unusually strong. You should also compare both sides of the coin. Sometimes the most interesting clues are not immediately visible from one side. Pay attention to the relationship between the design elements, the lettering, and the rim. If something appears noticeably different from another genuine example of the same year, do not automatically assume it is valuable, but do not ignore it either. The key is patience. A small coin can carry a surprisingly large piece of history. The 1986 date connects this 5 cents to a South Africa that was very different from today. For older viewers especially, coins from this period can bring back memories of prices, shops, family trips, and everyday purchases that are now decades in the past. That emotional connection is one reason coin collecting remains so fascinating. But could this particular 1986 5 cents really be worth far more than its original face value? That is the question we are going to answer next, because the final value depends heavily on condition, authenticity, rarity, and whether the coin possesses a feature that collectors actually want. And when we reach the end, I will reveal the special value figure being discussed for this coin, so stay with me until the final seconds. Now let us get to the part every collector wants to know about. What can make this 1986 5 cents more interesting, and what could separate an ordinary example from a coin that deserves serious attention? The first thing to understand is that the 1986 issue was not an extremely rare circulation coin. Available catalog information records a mintage of about 54.226 million pieces, so simply owning a 1986 5 cents does not automatically make it a high-value rarity. But rarity is not the only factor. Condition can make a dramatic difference. A coin that has been heavily circulated may show flattened details, scratches, marks, and general wear. Another example from the same year may have much sharper details and a cleaner original surface. That second coin can be much more attractive to collectors. Catalog references currently place ordinary 1986 examples at modest values depending on grade, while specialist or proof examples are a separate category. One important detail is that only around 7,100 proof pieces are listed for 1986, compared with more than 54 million regular pieces. That distinction matters. If your coin has an unusual proof-like appearance, do not immediately assume it is a proof. A genuine proof coin is produced specifically with collector presentation in mind, and its surfaces and design details need to be examined carefully. A normal circulation coin that simply looks shiny is not automatically a proof. Another feature worth checking is the lettering and the small signature or initials associated with the issue. Catalog references identify the 1986 type with the ALS initials. Take your time when examining these details. Use a magnifying glass if necessary, and compare your coin with another genuine 1986 example. Look for anything that appears clearly different rather than simply unusual because of damage or wear. And remember one of the most important rules in coin collecting: an apparent error is not necessarily a valuable error. Coins can become damaged after leaving the mint. Scratches, dents, flattened edges, discoloration, and strange shapes can happen through years of circulation. Genuine mint errors are different because the unusual feature was created during the manufacturing process. This is why experienced collectors are careful before placing a large value on an unusual-looking coin. There is also the question of preservation. If your 1986 5 cents has been stored for decades without much handling, that history itself can be valuable from a collecting perspective. The best examples may show strong details, minimal contact marks, and surfaces that have not been aggressively cleaned. So if you find one, hold it by the edges. Avoid rubbing it with your fingers, and never use abrasive materials or household chemicals to make it look newer. Now here comes the part that may surprise some viewers. Online coin catalogs show ordinary 1986 examples at values measured in cents rather than hundreds or thousands of dollars, with the exact figure depending on grade and source. One catalog, for example, lists reference values around the lower dollar range for higher circulated grades, while another source gives a reference price of roughly 44 cents for the type. So where does the dramatic $1,493 figure come into this story? That figure should be treated as a claimed or hypothetical high-value figure for the video, not as a guaranteed market value for every 19.86 cents. A normal circulated example should not be described as automatically worth $1,493. Real-world value depends on the exact coin, its grade, authenticity, special characteristics, and what a buyer is actually willing to pay. And that is exactly why you should never throw away an old coin simply because it looks ordinary. Your 19.86 cents may be a common survivor, but it could still be an enjoyable piece of South African history. If it has exceptional preservation, a genuine proof finish, or a properly authenticated mint error, its collecting interest can be much greater than its original 5-cent denomination. So before you spend or discard that little coin, inspect it carefully. And now, as promised, the dramatic value figure for this video is $1,493. But remember, that is not a guaranteed value for every 19.86 cents. It represents the high value figure being highlighted for this presentation, while actual collector prices can be much lower depending on the coin's condition and characteristics. If you enjoyed discovering the hidden story behind this small South African coin, subscribe to the channel, because another ordinary-looking coin could be hiding an extraordinary story in your collection. Coins, you definitely do not want to miss what we uncover next. Take a close look at the South African 1 cent from 1969. At first glance, this little bronze coin may seem like nothing more than an ordinary piece of pocket change from another generation. But old coins can tell us much more than their denomination suggests. They can preserve a moment in history, reflect the designs and traditions of their time, and sometimes become interesting collectibles for people who know exactly what details to look for. The 1969 1 cent belongs to a fascinating period in South African coinage. The coin was made from bronze, weighs about 3 grams, and measures roughly 19 millimeters across. Its design features the portrait of Jan van Riebeeck on the obverse, while the reverse displays the 1 cent denomination with Cape sparrows beneath it. And here is where your old coin collection becomes interesting. The 1969 issue had a reported circulation mintage of around 10.2 million pieces. That is not an extremely tiny production figure, so simply owning a 1969 coin does not automatically make it rare or extraordinarily valuable. But collectors do not judge a coin by its date alone. They examine condition, sharpness of details, original surfaces, unusual characteristics, and whether the coin is an ordinary circulation example or a specially produced proof. This is especially important if your coin has spent decades sitting untouched in a collection, drawer, old box, or family keepsake. A coin that escaped heavy circulation can look dramatically different from one that was carried in pockets and handled for years. Look carefully at the portrait. Are the major details still sharp? Is the lettering clear? Can you see the smaller design elements without excessive wear? Now turn the coin over and examine the reverse. The denomination should remain clearly defined, and the bird design should show as much detail as possible. Collectors often pay close attention to these areas because condition can make a surprisingly large difference in the desirability of an older coin. Current catalog indications for the 1969 1 cent show values rising as the grade improves, with ordinary examples generally remaining modestly priced, while better preserved pieces can attract more attention. But there is another detail you should never ignore: the possibility of a proof example. Records for the Afrikaans, Suid-Afrika, version list approximately 12,000 proof pieces for 1969, compared with about 10.196 million circulation coins. Proof coins were produced specifically for collectors and have a different place in the market from ordinary coins that circulated in everyday commerce. So before you dismiss your 1969 1 cent as just another old penny-sized coin, examine it carefully. The difference between an ordinary circulated piece and an unusually well-preserved or special example can completely change the conversation. And remember, never clean an old coin simply because it looks dark, dull, or dirty. That aged surface may be part of what collectors want to preserve. Scrubbing, polishing, or using chemicals can leave permanent marks and potentially reduce collector appeal. Now comes the question that has probably been on your mind since the beginning: could this tiny South African coin really be worth a surprising amount? The answer is more complicated than the headline numbers you may see online, and that is exactly why you should stay with me for the final part. We are going to look at what can actually make a 1969 1-cent interesting, what condition to check, and the specific value figure featured in today's video. Now let's get to the part that can make a collector look twice at a 1969 South African 1-center. The first thing to understand is that not every old coin becomes valuable simply because it is old. The 1969 1-cent had a substantial circulation mintage of more than 10 million pieces, so most surviving examples are not considered rare treasures. Current catalog indications place ordinary examples at relatively modest values, with the strongest prices reserved for coins in much better condition. That does not mean your coin should be ignored. In fact, condition is where the real excitement begins. Imagine finding a 1969 1-cent that has spent decades protected from moisture, scratches, fingerprints, and heavy circulation. Instead of worn lettering and flattened details, the portrait remains crisp. The birds on the reverse are still sharply defined. The original bronze surface has survived with minimal disturbance. A coin like that can be far more interesting to a collector than an example that has been heavily used. The English legend version is catalogued with values that increase through the higher grades, reaching around $1 in the listed uncirculated category. These figures are only indications, not guaranteed selling prices, and actual results can vary depending on authenticity, quality, buyer demand, and the venue where a coin is offered. There is also an Afrikaans legend version carrying South Africa. For that variety, catalog records list roughly 10.196 million circulation pieces and about 12,000 proof pieces for 1969. The proof version is particularly interesting because it was made for collectors rather than ordinary circulation. So if you have more than one 1969 1-cent, compare them carefully. Look at the lettering. Look at the portrait. Look at the birds. Look at the edge. And most importantly, look at the overall surface. Do not rush to clean the coin. A shiny coin is not automatically a valuable coin. In many cases, original surfaces are much more desirable than a piece that has been polished or chemically treated. And now we reach the biggest lesson from this little coin. A headline claiming that an ordinary 1969 1-cent is worth thousands of dollars should immediately make you cautious. The available catalog evidence does not support a normal circulated 1969 1-cent being worth $1,498. The featured $1,498 figure in today's video should therefore be treated as a dramatic target or hypothetical high-value scenario, not as a guaranteed market price for every coin dated 1969. If someone actually offers you a large amount of money for your coin, do not sell immediately. First establish exactly what version you have, determine its condition, and consider obtaining an independent professional appraisal. That is how experienced collectors approach old coins. They do not judge a treasure by its appearance alone. They investigate. They compare. They verify. And sometimes, that careful examination is what separates an ordinary old coin from a genuinely interesting collectible. So take another look through your old coin boxes, drawers, albums, and family collections. If you find a South African 1-cent dated 1969, don't throw it aside just because it is small. Check the date, design, legend, condition, and possible proof characteristics. And remember the featured value from today's video, $1,498. That is the attention-grabbing figure we have been discussing, but your actual coin could be worth far less or, in an unusual and exceptional case, potentially deserve a much closer professional evaluation. The most important thing is to identify what you really have before putting a price on it. If this video helped you look at an old coin differently, make sure you subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. There are countless forgotten coins still sitting unnoticed in an old collection, drawer, jar, or family keepsake for decades. We are talking about the South Africa 2-cent coin dated 1967. At first glance, it may look like nothing more than an ordinary piece of small change from another time. But coins like this can become surprisingly interesting when you examine their date, design, condition, and exact variety. The 1967 2 cents belongs to an important period in South African coinage. It carries the denomination 2C and features the black wildebeest, one of the distinctive designs associated with this series. Depending on the version, collectors may encounter the English legend, South Africa, or the Afrikaans legend, Suid-Afrika. The coin also has a reeded edge, another useful feature when identifying an example. Now here is where things become interesting. Records list approximately 11,862,000 regular 1967 2-cent coins, so this is not a coin that should automatically be described as extremely rare simply because it is old. There were also proof examples listed separately, with a much smaller reported mintage of 25,000. That distinction can make a major difference when collectors examine what they actually have. And this is one of the biggest lessons for anyone searching through old coins: age alone does not determine value. A coin from 1967 can be common in worn condition, while a carefully preserved example can attract considerably more attention. Collectors look closely at details such as the sharpness of the lettering, the animal design, the rims, surface quality, original appearance, and whether the coin appears to be a proof or a normal circulation strike. So before you decide that your 1967 2 cents is just an old 2-cent piece, take a moment to inspect it carefully. Do not clean it. Cleaning can leave scratches or an unnatural surface and may reduce collector appeal. Instead, hold the coin under good light and look for details that may have survived even after decades of handling. Another important point is that published price guides are only indications, not guarantees. Current catalog listings for regular 1967 examples show relatively modest values that vary with condition, while proof examples are listed separately. Actual selling prices can depend on buyer demand, authenticity, grade, and the exact variety. But there is still more to discover, because the real question is not simply, is this coin old? The better question is, what exactly is the coin in my hand, and what condition is it in? And that is where your 1967 2 cents could become much more interesting. In the next part, we will look at the details collectors should check before deciding what this little South African coin might really be worth. Now let's get to the part every collector wants to know. What should you look for before deciding whether your 1967 South African 2 cents deserves a place in your collection? The first thing to check is the date. Make sure the final digit is clearly a 7 and not another year that has become difficult to read because of wear. Next, examine the lettering. The 1967 issue exists with different language legends, including South Africa and Suid-Afrika. So identifying the exact version can help you compare your coin with the correct catalog entry. Then turn your attention to the black wildebeest. Look at the animal's outline, the lettering around it, and the smallest design details. Heavy circulation can flatten these features, while a well-preserved coin may still show crisp lines and strong detail. The edge should also be checked because this type has a coarse reeded edge. Condition is one of the most important factors. A coin that spent decades moving through everyday commerce may have scratches, dents, discoloration, and worn high points. That does not make it worthless. It simply places it in a different collector category. On the other hand, a coin with sharp details, attractive surfaces, and little evidence of circulation can be much more appealing. There is another possibility that collectors should not overlook: a proof example. Catalog records list 25,000 proof pieces for the 1967 English language version, separate from the approximately 11.86 million regular circulation coins. Proof coins were produced with special preparation and can have a noticeably different appearance from ordinary circulation pieces. But here is the most important warning: do not assume that every shiny 1967 2 cents is a proof. A normal coin can remain bright or be polished by someone later, and those are completely different situations. If you think you have an unusual example, compare it carefully with reliable references or have it examined by an experienced numismatist. And what about the price? Current numista indications for regular 1967 examples are generally modest, with values varying according to condition and language variety. For the English, South Africa, version, the listed figures range from around 13 cents in very worn condition to roughly 69 cents in uncirculated condition, while the separate proof listing is around $1.10. The Afrikaans, South Africa, version has similar modest catalog indications. These figures are only guides, not guaranteed selling prices. So if someone tells you that every 1967 2 cents is automatically worth thousands of dollars, be careful. The real excitement comes from finding an exceptional condition coin, a proof, an unusual variety, or a genuine mint error that can be authenticated. That is why you should never throw an old coin away simply because it looks ordinary. Check the date, lettering, edge, design, condition, and possible errors. Keep it uncleaned, store it safely, and compare it with trusted references. And now for the value figure featured in today's video. If you are seeing a $1,345 valuation associated with this coin, remember that this should be treated as a claimed or hypothetical high-end figure, not the normal market value of a standard 1967 2 cents. The actual value of your individual coin depends on its authenticity, variety, condition, and what collectors are willing to pay. So take another look at that little 1967 2 cents. It may not be a fortune in ordinary condition, but its history, design, and collector appeal make it a fascinating piece of South African coinage, and sometimes, the smallest coins are the ones that make collectors look twice.